Hello, welcome to another episode of SaaS Scaled. I'm here with Jason Radisson, CEO and founder at Movo. Jason, welcome.
Arman, thanks for having me on the show.
You're welcome. Tell us a little bit about yourself and a little bit about the company, maybe a story that how you ended up starting this company.
Yeah, sure. So my name is Jason Radisson, multiple founder of a couple of different tech companies. First, when I began my career in the algorithms and applied math space, and then in e-commerce, and sort of the last decade or so, I've been heavily involved in the future of work and gig economy companies, Uber, 99 Taxis, Rappi in Latin America. The idea for Movo was I was basically thinking about the gig worker and sort of what was next for the gig worker from a worker perspective and from a technology perspective. The platforms that we use in the gig economy or used in the gig economy were super heavily automated, very intelligent platforms that managed kind of all aspects of work. And the way I would describe it is they're more like a massive multiplayer online game than they are an ERP platform or a traditional cloud SaaS product. So I was really thinking about how to take that experience into big companies, how to help workers get ahead, how to help workers find jobs as easily as they could in the gig economy, and then how to bring these really awesome tools to big enterprises.
Fantastic. So you mentioned gig economy, and of course, we are entering into the new world that is way more sophisticated than it used to be for our fathers and grandfathers.
That's for sure.
And grandparents. So definitely, flexibility plays a big role. People are going after flexibility. Gig economy is part of it, and more options. And then at the same time, this is going to also introduce more sophisticated rules when it comes how to really manage this kind of work environments. And technology can help, fortunately, at the age we are, to overcome that and just making sure that, we still can manage it in a benefit actually the workers, benefit the companies, benefit the customers, users. In the new age of AI, it's also important to leverage that technology because then it helps us to even better manage that sophistication, right? So I know that AI is a big part of what you guys do. How do you see that from your perspective on different fronts? Of course, based on my understanding, I feel like you are thinking about gig economy to get bigger, not smaller. So you see that as a very kind of, big part of the economy in the future. It's going to grow. And then what kind of, flexibility and sophistication might be needed to manage it and how AI might be helpful in that regard.
For sure. I think I'm going to go meta for a second, but I think the big AI in the future of work is a scheduling AI essentially, and it's sort of big companies' abilities to move workers around and slot them into the best possible spot. Mm-hmm. Obviously we need some scheduling, structure and repeatability. Otherwise you can't run factories and hospitals and things. But there's a lot of flexibility around the edges of that. That's where I think we find a lot of win-wins. We can be more personalized in allowing workers to find a flexible schedule. We can be more flexible in terms of bringing in people on part-time, bringing in gig types of jobs to help fill out the schedule. I think that's one of the biggest applications for AI in the workplace. Before even kind of talking about hiring decisions and other things, it really is, it starts with scheduling and career pathing and the kinds of things that we've called internal labor marketplace or internal marketplace. I think we're going to find those more prevalent in all kinds of big companies in particular.
So in this particular case, then based on my understanding, you say there are very obvious use cases that AI can help, that are low-hanging fruits. And we start from there. And then as we learn how to tackle those issues and those, challenges and do a great job, that paves the way for many other use cases that maybe are secondary and so forth and, so on and so forth. So from that aspect, definitely if we could solve 100% with very easy to work with, and we could solve that scheduling problem, then you would say that would facilitate a lot of, just make it easier to really go and just start a gig economy based on gig economy, a startup or a business.
Exactly. I think that's where a lot of the initial benefits, some of the biggest levers are. Those are also, they're not the kind of thing where you're just going to be able to apply a general large language model to, because you've got to inform your system with internal data, internal career success data, internal qualifications data and things like that. But I think that's one of the biggest ones, because, put another way, imagine that you could get 10 or 20% more workforce effectiveness and productivity out of a Walmart, out of a Target, out of a Boeing. That's the kind of promise that's out there. So I think that's one of the biggest levers for AI really in our economy, and as we look at the next sort of 10 years out, I think that's where a lot of the benefits will come. It starts there. But there are other very clear use cases. We've been working in Movo, and I think one of the things that we solved at the beginning of the pandemic that's really, continues to prove very useful in the economy is our ability to hire people pretty much automatically, and fully credentialed people with college degrees, people with graduate degrees, people in very sophisticated jobs where, if the volume is high enough, you've got really strong signal. And you're able to have a very fair system that sort of takes away, definitely all of the time lag of having to deal with scheduling, a bunch of human interventions, and really gives HR departments, a lot of flexibility, because they're freeing up 80-90% of their time that they would be dealing with kind of paperwork, and instead able to focus just really on the interventions and interactions with candidates that really matter. I think that's kind of one of the other really big use cases for AI. And you don't see a lot of it out there. A lot of the traditional cloud guys and ERP guys have really focused on kind of applicant tracking systems, and even just the name. It's sort of like, it's software to accompany a manual process, rather than really using software for what software does best, for automating things that are kind of low value processes. I think that one is, we're going to see a lot more of it, and probably partially because of what's happening on the large language model front, where people are also sort of seeing, well, it used to be writing job descriptions was something that required, a high degree of skill for, or, writing interview questions or evaluating interview answers, and all of these things now. We're finding that there are models that do that really well. We really don't need humans nearly as much already today, and just wait another year or two. I think that sort of manual side of recruiting is really going to go by the wayside.
Fascinating. So essentially, many of these industries are pretty old, and one of these things that you just mentioned, and AI is giving a leapfrog to kind of, many of these new companies to really do those kind of things very more efficiently and faster and better, and changing the process of recruiting, for even interviewing, even job description reviews or resumes reviews, or scoring the candidates, or even when they are on board, managing them, and all of these processes that are going to be rewritten in the next 5 years. And we should just rethink about everything that we have done in the past and see how it's going to be done in the next 5 to 10 years. Now, how does it impact SaaS in general? Because SaaS as a software as a service subscription, rather than just you provide the software as a technology and you perpetually, like old days, you own it. Now in the new age, of course, in the SaaS age, now you are looking at it as a software that you use it as a service, meaning that you may not even looking at it as a technology or software anymore. There's nothing you do with it. You don't, you just go there and just, for most cases, for many of these SaaS applications, very easy to get it started and you use it as a service. And while you are subscribed to it, you take advantage of whatever functionality they provide to you. Now with this kind of new era that we are starting and all of these discussions that we just had, how do you feel like SaaS is going to change in the next 5 to 10 years based on these?
Yeah. I think the short answer is very dramatically. And I think we're already seeing it, if I think of my own team and sort of what I'm seeing more broadly in the industry, there is a lot of sort of the mid-level and entry-level roles are already significantly enhanced by LLMs and sort of the current state of AI. Mm-hmm. You can Google this stuff. There are prompts in ChatGPT where you can literally have ChatGPT write product requirement documents for almost any product feature you could think of. Obviously it's really good in some languages in particular. You can kind of do it really sort of the more basic things of integration work. If you're thinking of sort of backend teams working on APIs and kind of standard integrations, basic Python, data crunching, a lot of those kind of entry-level software jobs, are really, I don't want to say that the engineers are all going away, but an engineer becomes 10 times more productive, probably. Mm-hmm. And that just has really broad implications. And I think, as we can all sort of see a few years out, it's easy to see that the market's going to be a little bit more, let's say the job market is going to be more skewed to the top in system design. Mm-hmm. And you're going to be able to, think of a concept and then launch a bunch of agents to go build a bunch of MVPs. So I think, broadly speaking, we're going to see an acceleration of innovation in SaaS, an erosion of moats too, because if anybody can sit down and in a day launch a couple of companies, there's just going to be a proliferation of startups. It's kind of an interesting phase that we're entering into. I mean, it's already gotten a lot easier, right? In a sense, capital is hard right now. Access to capital is hard, but that's always cyclical. But it's gotten easier than it's been. If I look back at the aughts, it was extremely hard to sort of get your infrastructure up and running. Not extremely hard, but you needed a whole infrastructure. Mm-hmm. Whereas already, we have our AWS accounts or, our Google accounts or Google Cloud accounts or whatever, and we're able to launch much more quickly. Here, we're literally talking about founders being able to sit down and launch end startups in a short period of time.
So you mentioned that, funding money, raising money and those kind of things for SaaS companies, of course, is cyclical, and that's correct. Yeah. And it goes up and down, but let's forget about that kind of short cycles and let's think about a 5 or 10 years period of time that in average you look at the average, you don't look at the every single quarter to go up and down. Do you think that, for example, during the last 10 years, it has been a great time to start a SaaS company? So if you have been a SaaS founder, for most part, it has been a great time to really do that because essentially, SaaS has been a great business model to get it working. And if you can pass that stage and you are post revenue and the company is really generating, good amount of revenue, then it's a very robust business model because it's subscription and you can build easier on top of that and grow. Do you think the next 10 years also will be a great time for SaaS companies and SaaS founders to really go and start? Or do you think, based on what we see and this AI kind of technologies and everything, it's a question mark? There are reasons to believe that might be, or there are reasons to think maybe not.
Well, I think I'm bullish on SaaS companies. And I think, for the reasons we were just talking about, I think there's going to be a kind of a Cambrian explosion, because you're going to be able to found a company really with minimal friction. And maybe even, a company that then has 10 different MVPs in the marketplace. And essentially you've written some prompts and, auto GPT style, you're able to launch these new products. So I think that's the bold future that's coming. I think what, sort of curbs my enthusiasm probably a little bit is I also think that it's going to be big companies are going to be doing the same thing. And it's actually going to mean that big companies will become more nimble, which is generally not so good for competition or not so good for the startup ecosystem. So I think we're going to, we're going to see both of those effects sort of at tension over the next 10 years.
Very interesting point. Now back to Movo. What is your vision about when you say all-in-one, kind of a comprehensive HR, platform? What do you mean by very comprehensive A to Z? What elements are part of that from your vision standpoint?
Yeah, absolutely. So as we conceived the company, we really wanted to solve. Pardon me. We really wanted to solve the problem end to end. All things kind of related to frontline workforce management. So high volume deployments in the medical space, from hospitals to home healthcare and other medtech kinds of arenas, on manufacturing, on logistics, on retail, a lot of these places where, there was going to be a longstanding need for workers to be in person with a lot of great technical and professional skills, and where, there was a fair amount of deployment complexity. And we wanted to help kind of take all of that complexity out. And kind of as you look at those industries, they also tend to be ones that don't have a lot of really great software, where things are largely managed, pen and paper, cell phones, WhatsApp, text messaging, Excel, and really some fairly large companies. And as we kind of looked at that space, we realized, that, per our earlier conversation, there was a lot of value in just helping. Really, the value levers were going to come from deploying workers more accurately, and really holistically, not just like in tomorrow's schedule, but then also, in line with their skills and their career development and being able to kind of help people to level up more quickly. And we realized that, there were going to be frictions in hiring. These are sectors of the economy that were going to be understaffed for at least the next decade. And so, as we kind of looked at all of those problems, we decided that it was really one end-to-end approach that was needed. And as we initially built out our platform, we really focused on sort of what I would call all of the real-time plumbing to be able to handle all of the use cases and solve all of those problems end to end. And I think as we've, the best way I would describe it these days is probably to think of the metaphor of almost a massive multiplayer online game, because you have similar sorts of dynamics, right? You've got to keep your eye on teams and sort of peer-to-peer interactions as they're happening in real time in what's immediately in front of you. And there are also things that pop up that are interesting because they're timely, and it's sort of, that's if you sort of in the main UX of our platform, you can see your shifts that are maybe understaffed, maybe overstaffed, running too hot, running too cold. For anybody who's running a hospital, this is very common dynamic, right? As you sort of go through the day and the night. You can look at sort of and drill into any kinds of issues and imbalances that you have. You can look at your recruiting productivity and see sort of like weeks out where there are issues that are emerging and opportunities that are emerging. And you can manage, a lot of the things that in a similar way, leveling up is akin to, sort of what happens in the workplace also is your workforce is developing new skills, and, going through training and able to open up essentially new career opportunities on the platform. So we kind of looked at it in that really kind of holistic, real-time way. And, like I said, the real magic is when you start to put really powerful AIs on top of some of these processes as we have, where you're really able to help just, obviously the company, but also thousands of workers in their day-to-day to get ahead.
Now, being a data analytic guy, I need to ask you about, for example, what's your vision around the data side of these kind of platforms? And when I say, the data side, it has different layers. There are layers that are more about integration that needs to be done, made perhaps by a super user or developer. There are aspects of no-code part of it that you want a business analyst to come in and just work with the no-code side of it and doesn't have to code. And you can just hand it over to a business kind of analyst and say, you have all the power you need to really manage a lot of things. And then you have the very end user part of it that has to be extremely simple. And they need to work with data and gain insight and leverage the functionalities from data and analytics perspective. So how would you see that on the data side, the analytics side, the platform can do these, and which layer is more important from your perspective in your platform?
100%. Interesting topics in there, and especially with this kind of brave new world we're entering from the data perspective. But I would start on data. My first point in data would be that usually where HR SaaS struggles is mostly the people that you need data, or the work that you need data from. Usually your workforce doesn't like to use the HR tools. I'll just say it. I think a lot of us live it. It's mostly seen as, this compliance software that, essentially is being foisted on people. And so really our first problem was, how do we get, the product itself to be super useful to the end user, to the frontline worker, so that we get the data in the first place, we have the adoption in the first place, and we're able to do cooler things with it and really help the business. So I think data, that's number one question to solve. Once you have all of the data, we've taken a stance that's very much real time and massive. And we're trying, there's so much opportunity during the day to optimize schedules and deployments and dispatch. If you're talking about, clean tech and you're talking about a field engineering team, for instance, or if you're talking about a nursing floor. So we really have looked at it first and foremost. We've tried to sort of package the data in a UX that is very interactive, that sort of immediately helps guide you to the big problems and the big opportunities that you've got out there. And then as you drill in, we sort of get into the, I think there's a cadence, there's a natural weekly cadence. We've got a bunch of reporting around sort of the cadence and weekly effectiveness and things like that. And then you get into deeper and deeper sort of queries and other structured and unstructured. But for the most part, by the time an analyst is pulling something, we've got it fairly structured. But I think it's, frontline supervisors, headquarters supervisors, and executives who are overlooking, a massive workforce. It's generally, that is the real time is really what we tend to do. And as said, the product is basically, it's real time visualizations of what you've got going on from our live maps to our, kind of real time shift reports.
Yeah, and in general, it doesn't matter if it's about getting the data in or getting the data out. We have seen that people tend to move toward that self-service, no-code, low-code world because it just makes them faster, more nimble. They can change the business rules. Maybe they can change the workflow. They can change the notifications. They can, just do it without getting into the code. And then, of course, as soon as you change the code, there are zillions of things come with it, like the production and QA and all of that things. So we have seen that, and I think back to the discussion we had around AI, I think maybe AI can give no code, low code a totally different meaning in the future. It can really make it, push it to the next level. So rather than you have to really just use some of these no-code tools to create something, it might be a form, it might be a process, it might be a workflow, it might be a report, it might be a chart. Doesn't matter what it is. Maybe that AI technology now can really assist you or even do it for you, and without writing a code, but even automating the automation for you.
Yeah, exactly. And suggesting and like I said, like on one level, our product is essentially, or at least the web interface of our platform, it's done in such a way that it's just immediately, it's sort of real time analytics and it's immediately useful. A story I would tell is, I think we, if you look at us that came from the gig economy, we tended to run our cities in real time with live maps. And there's been, I don't know if the press always got the project names right, but basically a system in Uber that we relied on heavily was called Heaven. And Heaven was essentially a live map of everything going on in the city. You could kind of zoom in and out of different cities and whatnot. In our platform, we have the same kind of a thing. We have a live map, and it's just a very different way of interacting with a massive force. If you imagine a retailer with 30 different supermarkets in a metro, the ability to kind of zoom in and know exactly what's going on in the floor in real time is just, it's a whole different management paradigm. You're not sort of looking at the weekly, or you can look at the weekly report and sort of see your efficiency. But that's a little bit more managing by outcomes and managing in the rear view mirror. This is literally live map, and you're able to sort of get in and intervene wherever there are emerging opportunities. And I think that's a lot more the trend. And then to your point, there's sort of a secondary place for, essentially Python. It's essentially ChatGPT or GPT-4 already writes really good Python code. And, we're not too far away from a platform like ours and many other, SaaS companies out there, simply having a module where an analyst can prompt it, or, an untrained business person can prompt it with some analytics and some reporting that they'd like done, and having the system kick out a custom report based on that prompt that you've just entered. So I think that's going to be more of the modality. And I would bet that we're really just a year or two away from having a lot of that functionality in the SaaS landscape.
Fascinating. Okay. And I would like to ask you also to maybe make some suggestions on the books that you liked, some of the greatest books that maybe you have read and you think they are, making positive impacts in what you do.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say definitely given this audience too, Jeffrey Moore's Crossing the Chasm is something that one of the books that throughout my career I find myself going back to time and time again. For all of all of us who are out there building a product, scaling a product, bringing it from your early adopters to mass market with all of the sort of strategies and potential pitfalls. That's a great one. One of the first that I recommend. In terms of the overall progression of technology and some of the breakout technologies that are happening to us right now. I love Kevin Kelly's What Technology Wants. I think that's also, it's a very meta book in a number of ways, but, it's really sort of, I think, really highlights what makes the world move forward and how sort of technology spreads and how, the world, how the world advances, how we end up evolving as a society, and despite whatever disruptions there are, sort of how we end up reorganizing around them. I think that's one. I just reread it recently, and I think very germane to the time we're living in right now with these large language models proliferating.
Fantastic. It was a pleasure speaking with you, Jason. I'm so glad we had you, and I will follow you, of course, and I look forward to speaking with you again soon.
Thanks, Arman. Thanks for having me on the show. It's been great to be here.